swing space, and legal settlements and outside counsel services. The administration has taken an approach with the department where we want to show some truth in budgeting and fully fund the department for their actual costs in lieu of putting in gimmicks to where the department would be forced to redirect funds to cover these expenses. So by us fully funding them for their correct operations, we shouldn't be redirecting from other sources in their budget, including programs and other areas in the future. So we appreciate the staff recommendation here, and we support this proposal.
Thank you. Colleagues, as distasteful as it is for me to want to support another $53 million to the Department of Corrections, I do so in the context of the governor's realignment proposal, which, when implemented, will cut $2 billion finally from the department's budget. And this really is a bit more of truth in advertising than what we've been doing in past years, pretending that there weren't costs there and then having to come up with, as we will be discussing on the floor the next day, a significant deficiency bill. So this is an approach to be more forthright and truthful given the population trends as they are, as opposed to what we want them to be.
I move staff recommendation.
Senator Leno?
Yes, Senator Hancock.
Yeah, I realize the staff recommendation has been moved, and I would like to point out that it is true. We have structurally underfunded prisons in recent years, in the same way we structurally underfund many other institutions, such as schools, for the achievements that we want to have made. And I think since prisons are a mandatory 24/7 set of institutions, the result of the structural underfunding has been significant cuts to rehabilitation, education, and everything that would lower our 70% recidivism rate. So I think this is a good truing up of the budget, and I appreciate that because it's the only way we can actually hold people accountable for performance. I would like to note that both subcommittees also restored $48 million in transitional facilities back to the community. And while this motion doesn't deal with that, those are going to be very important also for the success of realignment and restructuring. Should those community-based facilities actually be allowed to go away, in 6 months we're going to have 10,000 more people out on the street, and there would be no place for them to go and no support systems for them in the community. So I think that with these two appropriations, we should be in a good position to meet the challenges ahead.
Thank you, Senator Hancock, for your comments, for your advocacy, and your leadership on the rehabilitation programs, especially in light of the Supreme Court decision and the future we're all going to be dealing with. To have that infrastructure within the communities dismantled would be a formula for disaster. So we have a motion by Senator Huff. Might I ask if there's any objection to using our unanimous roll call? So this motion will pass 16-0. Committee members, moving on to page 26 in the Department of Education, moving on from Corrections to Education. State operations with charter schools staff. Welcome.
Elisa Wynn with Department of Finance. This proposal was from the Department of Education for $734,000 in general fund state operations funding for workload in the charter schools division. The request does not include position authority. The department would redirect 7 existing unfunded positions to this division to handle charter workload. The Assembly approved this additional funding. The administration and the Senate in their prior actions did not approve additional funding for the department.
Very good. So the staffing authority is already in place?
Yes.
this would be enable you
In
to...
other areas of the department, they would move positions into
Right, so
this
no new
division.
positions.
Right.
Right. Elio?
We did do a staffing analysis, and we don't think the entire $734,000 is justified at this time. We would recommend $411,000.
Okay. Comments, questions from our committee? This is general fund. Yeah. We have a motion by Senator Lowenthal to...
Additional $734,000
Right.
in general fund.
Very good. All right, and without objection, we're going to take our partisan count, which would be 11 Democrats voting aye, 5 Republicans voting no. All right. Page 27. Again, in the Department of Education, this is federal Title I funds, a proposal put forward by the governor, allocating some Prop 98 dollars.
Yes, Ryan Storm with the Department of Finance. In the governor's budget and in the May revision, the administration proposed using some old Title I federal funds to disperse that to school districts and allow them to use that for a whole host of funding needs that they have, staffing, professional development, et cetera. The Assembly just took action to use $3.5 million of that to help usher in the new era of Common Core standards. These are a host of new academic standards that are being developed across the country. California has already adopted theirs, and what the Assembly has already adopted is the idea to use $3.5 million of that for professional development, aligning some of our state standards to the Common Core, and that's about the sum of it.
What becomes of Title I carryover dollars if we don't use them this time? Is there a life to them? What's the future of them?
There's typically a 2-year life. The first year you appropriate, obviously you can spend it, but then there's about 2 more years that you could spend it. So this amount of money that's being carried over into 11-12 would be the first year that you could that the funds would live on, and then you would have another year after that.
Very good. Thank you. Elio?
Rachel Ehlers, LAO. This is really a policy decision if you want to set aside some of this funding. I think the Assembly action is pursuant to some legislation that's currently working its way through the process.
Thank you. So the action taken by the Assembly was to approve the $21.3 million in the one-time Title I carryover that the governor had proposed, and then rather than the 4.125 of the one-time federal Title I basic program money, 3.5 million to be used as outlined in the agenda as the Assembly put forward.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Senator Huff.
We'd like to split the vote when you get to that, to the $21.3 million in one vote and then the balance in another.
All right. So we'll take a motion from Senator Huff on the first vote that we will take, which is to approve the $21.3 million in the Title I carryover per the governor's
Just to be
proposal.
clear, I think the entire pot of funding available is $21.3 million.
I'm sorry.
So you would be, I think, carving out of that amount some 3 or 7.
Yeah, let me clarify. The $21.3 million is a May revision amount, and the 4.1 that we were talking about, that's actually included in the governor's budget. So from staff's perspective, we've been talking about the 21.3 pursuant to the May revision, but there is this older money that was included in the governor's budget. And what the Assembly has done is they've taken that older money, the 4.1, and they've taken 3.5 of it and geared it towards the Common Core.
So we're going to take 2 votes here. The one is to approve the $21.3 million, in Title I carryover per the governor's proposal. So that's our first vote, and the motion's been made by Senator Huff. And without objection, we'll use our unanimous vote count of 16 to 0. And then Senator Lowenthal is making the motion to use $3.5 million in the Title I basic program carryover to be used per the delineation approved by the Assembly for the 3 different programs. And we'll call the roll on that. Oh, well, I think we can, again, without objection, use our 11-5 vote. Very good. Both measures are approved. So, again, within the Department of Education, on page 28, we have Federal English Language Proficiency Assessment Grant language. I know this was not a governor's proposal, but can you share any thoughts you may have?
I can do my best. The Department of Education has requested some budget bill language that would authorize them that if they receive a competitive federal grant, that would authorize them to contract in short order with a group that would allow them to implement the federal grant. Federal grant requires them to get going on it within 6 months of receiving the grant. And what this grant will do is it will allow the state to develop an English language assessment that is more aligned with the Common Core and take that next step into Common Core and making a more robust assessment.
Very good. So it's
it's only budget bill language. It
right.
does not appropriate any funds.
It's actually to expedite the contracting process.
That's right.
So the Department of Education can access some federal funds it's concerned it may not otherwise be able to do without the expedition. That's
right. And then when and if the state receives the federal grant, then we would, at Department of Finance, notify you and through a Section 28 process, then appropriate the monies.
Very good. Elio?
No concerns. This is pretty technical.
All right. Senator Lowenthal?
I adopt the revised CDE language as budget bill language.
All right. We have a motion to adopt the CDE language as budget bill language. And then again, without objection, this will pass on an 11-5 vote. Next issue is student and teacher data systems, an issue that's been debated. So I think we all may remember that the governor proposed eliminating these federal dollars to continue to support our CalPads and CalTides systems. And the Assembly proposal was to restore just about all of that money. And Senator Smitty, do you want to speak to this? I know you have some. Oh, Senator Liu.
Senator Liu is the chair of the budget.
Yes, she is.
You
being the granddaddy of
right
of the systems.
But we did restore and approve the restoration for full funding of CalTides and CalPads.
And the difference between the Assembly action and the Senate was 6.134 to 6.6. All right.
So we worked over the course of the spring to try to shave off as much as possible. As you can see from the numbers, we didn't find a whole lot. We don't think CalPAD's budget is, quote, bloated. We found about $500,000. So we recommend the $6.1 million as opposed to the $6.6 million. But again, it's a small difference, and we do think the project should continue moving forward at really whichever of these levels, although the 6.1 is something we can give you backup for.
Senator Liu, might we have a motion for...
Approve the recommendation.
And that would be for the full 6.6?
Yes.
We would support 6.1.
And then also the 2.1 for CalTides. All right. And without objection, we'll use our 11-5 vote. The next item is with regards to the deferral buy-down.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thomas Todd, Finance. So the governor's May revision essentially proposed to unwind the latest K-12 deferral that was enacted as part of the March budget package, as well as provide an additional $434 million to start buying down some of the prior deferrals that we've created over the years. The two houses took slightly different actions on that. Both houses essentially ended up approving the unwinding of the newest deferral, but they differed in the amount of money that they directed to start buying down, if you will, some of the prior year deferrals.
And is it accurate to say that this proposal is really dependent upon some additional revenue moving forward?
The additional funds that were identified at May Revise, and specific to K-12, the additional $2.5 billion that we provided to pay down deferrals is predicated on that assumption, yes.
Okay. Leo?
Edgar Cabral, LAO. We have recommended that any additional funding above the governor's January proposal be used to pay down existing deferrals.
Right. A good opportunity for us to do so, and I think the students of California will appreciate it as well. Senator Liu?
Well, I move the recommendation that, given, I guess with a caveat of whether or not we get the budget passed, that we use the funds to pay down our deferral.
So it's the elimination of the $2.1 billion in K through 12.
It's a start on a deferral.
And then reduce prior year deferrals by $265 million in 11-12. I'm sorry. All right. Sorry, that would be to reduce the prior year's deferral by $284 million in 11-12, and then also to reduce the prior year deferrals by an additional $663 in 11-12, using up the settle-up funds.
Right.
All right, so that's our motion. Senator Huff.
Yeah, am I missing something here? But the governor's proposal is to unwind some of these deferrals, and deferrals do cost us some money, or at least we can make some savings by unwinding those. The settle-up funds doesn't, we're not paying any interest on that, are we?
No.
So I guess I'm wondering, is it wiser fiscally to be taking care of the deferrals as the governor's laid out, as opposed to working on the settle-ups at this point?
Well, I think the settle-up funds, it is additional general fund appropriations that you would be making. In this case, it is an appropriation that you're making to pay off an existing obligation that you have. So obviously, it still costs you in the general fund, but it is an obligation that eventually, at some point, the state is required to pay. Now, you're right. There is no interest being earned on that obligation. So there isn't any additional penalty for waiting longer. But it is an obligation.
The governor's trying to repay special funds that are loans, right? That has some extra money associated if we don't pay that off.
Yeah, I'm not
extra interest money. Yeah, let's get the head guru.
Mr. Cohen, welcome.
Greetings from the Assembly. Michael Cohen, Department of Finance. So the May revision did have $744 million in paying off of special fund loans earlier than would have otherwise been the case. Here, basically, it's substituting that payoff for settle up. Both are owed. Both are part of the so-called wall of debt, the $34.7 billion. There is, as Senator Huff notes, interest costs on the special fund loans, but given today's low interest rates, those are averaging about 0.5%. That was one of the reasons we actually went to these loans to begin with, was when we moved away from the sale of state buildings, because the special fund loans were at such a low interest rate. But the point is true that there would be slightly higher interest rates, but at the same time, you're still paying down the same amount of money on the wall of debt. And in fact, because the settle-up is also being used to reverse deferrals, you're kind of getting this two-for hit where we owe the money to Proposition 98, and we also reverse deferrals. So you're using one-time money to pay off this the one-time deferral, and so that's kind of the rationale in a nutshell.
And in the May revision, we're giving K-14 how much more revenue than we were in January?
We're at it's about $3 billion.
And even without a tax increase, it's how much more money?
Without the tax extensions, we'd be at about $50.5 billion compared to the $49.4 that was at the conference level, about $1 billion
So I would
higher.
throw this question back out to the committee. Why, even if it's only a small percentage, are we doing the settle up instead of something that actually would save more ongoing money by paying off special fund debt? It doesn't make sense to me.
And your response, Mr. Cohen, was due to the especially low interest rate.
The low interest rates, the administration's interest is in paying off that entire $35 billion as soon as possible. Choosing among them is a legislative and governor sort of priority of figuring out which one makes the most sense. Interest costs certainly factor in there, but because of the low interest rates, it's not the driving factor. Obviously, mines can defer May revision. We chose the loans, but we're also comfortable on the settle up.
Very good. So we do have the motion is made by Senator Liu, and without objection, we'll use our 11-5 vote. That motion passes. Our second last item in the Department of Education has to do with action that we took a few months back regarding 11 and 12-year-olds and child care.
Sarah Swan, Department of Finance.
Yes.
So actually these next three issues were all part of a package of child care reductions that were adopted in March. As adjusted for workload changes in the May revision, those reductions totaled $442.7 million. This first issue with the 11 and 12-year-olds eliminates or deprioritizes services for 11 and 12-year-olds who are served during traditional hours, basically 8 to 5. For savings of $31.5 million, and in addition, language was adopted in March that also prioritized waiting lists for those children in after-school programs.
And the Assembly then restored the 11, 12-year-old funding
Correct.
with ongoing Prop 98 funds.
Actually, they restored it with settle-up money.
Okay. Aaliyah?
Mr. Chair, it may be helpful to consider these three items together.
Sure.
As Ms. Swan indicated, in March, the legislature enacted a package of reductions for child care that totaled roughly $450 million. The Assembly action was to restore all of those reductions. The Senate took action to restore one of them, the standardized reimbursement rate for Title V centers at $120 million. As I understand the compromise before you today, it's to kind of hit in between the two houses and restore $200 million in total, which would reverse the three policy changes here on your agenda: the elimination of services for 11 and 12-year-olds, the increase in family fees, and a portion of the unallocated contract reduction from moving it from 15% to 11%.
Thank you. Senator Liu.
As was stated, the Senate only restored the formula for SSRs, and the rest came from the Assembly, and this is part of the consensus or confirmation of trying to agree with both houses. And we are still not at full restoration, maybe less than 45% of what was originally, the governor originally proposed. So I would move that we follow the recommendations here on those three items of the services to the 11, 12-year-olds, the lowering the family fee by 10%, and to restore the $40 million for ongoing Prop 98 funds for child care.
Very good. Any questions or comments from committee? We will then, so this vote would be per the motion of Senator Liu for those three items, the child care for 11 and 12-year-olds, the family fee, and then the restoration of $40 million from ongoing Prop 98 funds for child care. And we will use the 11-5 vote for all three. And then at the bottom of page 32, this is in response to the governor's proposal to eliminate the Early Learning Advisory Council. And the proposal is to move it to the Department of Education. Can you speak to this?
Thank
I know
you.
it's not your proposal.
As you stated, the administration is proposing to eliminate the Early Learning Advisory Council to address concerns about potential cost pressures, primarily associated with establishing a quality rating improvement system, as well as establishing a 0 to 5 data tracking system. And the administration acknowledges that that would require returning a planning grant of $10.8 million in ARPA funds. Federal, correct.
Right.
However, it's really intended to limit those or eliminate those out-year cost pressures.
I know, but it needs to.
Very good. And Elio?
We need to work with it. We need to have
Just to reiterate, the administration's proposal would have resulted in the reversion of a federal grant. So I think the intent here of the action is to try and be able to hold on to that grant and have additional legislative input and oversight over how the grant is used.
So we're talking about $3.6 million of federal dollars.
The full grant was 10.8. 3.6 is the piece of it associated with 2011-12. But I think the understanding is if the ELAC were eliminated, the full 10.8 would be at risk.
Thank you for clarifying that. And again, also with the trailer bill language to provide greater oversight and authority and responsibility to the Superintendent of Public Instruction.
I think that's the intent, yes.
All right.
I would move the recommendation to adopt the trailer bill language and to move ELAC into the Department of Education.
Thank you, Senator Liu. And without objection, we will use the 11-5 vote. Motion passes. We're on page 33, folks. We are trying to move as quickly as we can, but we've got to get through our work. This is in the Post-Secondary Education Commission, proposed elimination of the California Post-Secondary Education Commission put forward by the governor.
Thank you. As part of the administration's proposal to achieve statewide efficiencies, the administration is proposing to eliminate the Post-Secondary Education Commission effective January 1st for savings of $927,000 in general fund in the budget year. And we're also proposing to shift responsibility for administering a federal grant, the Improving Teacher Quality Grant, from CPEC to the Department of Education. And generally speaking, and the LAO can certainly speak to this, there have been a number of concerns with CPEC's effectiveness with respect to their program review function. And specifically, all three segments have very thorough procedures for developing and establishing new programs. CPEC's role is really an advisory one only. And the segments have the ability to move forward regardless. The other primary function is to serve as a clearinghouse for data. However, that data is also accessible through all three segments on their websites, as well as through the national database, IPEDS database, the source for which is also the segments.
All right, thank you. So The budget bill language before us would request the LAO to recommend to the policy committee how we can better structure CPEC as opposed to the governor's proposal to eliminate it.
Correct. Maybe
Senator
LAO.
Liu?
Well, LAO.
Yes.
Mr. Steve Boiler with the Analyst's Office. Yeah, just to clarify, both houses rejected the governor's proposal, and I think much of that was expressing some concern that while there may be some shortcomings in how CPEC's performing, there still are central critical roles that do need to be performed. And we had suggested that you might want to spend some time thinking about proper kind of solutions. The Senate adopted a sunset for CPEC, which we think actually makes sense to buy you some time, but the Assembly suggested that it go to Policy Committee. So I think the idea of language, in my understanding, I think it's supplemental report language before you, would provide that by January 1st that our office would have convened all key stakeholder groups in order to try and devise some kind of way to ensure that these same functions are performed, but perhaps in a better way, either with restructured CPEC or some other agency.
Very good, thank you.
And I would concur. I mean, I think we need to have some time to rethink of all these higher education agencies and how they can better help the state set priorities and processes so our kids can benefit from them.
So we'll take that as a motion?
I take it as a motion that we adopt the supplemental language regarding CPEC. It's on the handout that was passed out.
Very good. And I know that Senator Vasconcellos would thank you for that motion.
Right.
And without objection, we will use the 11-5 vote. Motion passes. Page 34, University of California and Intercollegiate Athletics.
So this is not an administration proposal, but the Assembly adopted language that precludes the use of general fund on intercollegiate athletics at the University of California. We understand that the practice has been that UC does not currently use general fund for intercollegiate athletics.
So this really will put in statute the way we operate, but just to tie things down. Elio?
Yes, Senator, we would agree. We're not sure how critical it is to have this language, but we don't believe it would do any harm. It would codify existing practice.
Thank you. Senator Liu?
I would concur with the LAO, but people feel comfortable with this. It's fine.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Emerson.
Where did this language come from?
Page of my own, Carol.
34. I thought it came from the Assembly. Did it come from the Assembly? It came from the Assembly.
Yeah, but if the university is not asking for this language, I just don't believe the Assembly just came up with this out of the clear blue sky, did they?
Well, maybe some of them are concerned that the university is spending money on athletics.
Okay.
In any case, it is in defense of general funds. And we'll use the 11-5 vote. That measure passes. And the next item at the University of California deals with enrollment targets.
So the legislature back in March adopted enrollment targets for both UC and CSU. For UC specifically, 209,977 full-time equivalent students. The Senate, which is the same as for the current year, 10-11, the Senate modified the enrollment target language to provide some flexibility in the penalty that's associated with not meeting the enrollment target. UC has indicated clearly that they will not have any difficulty meeting or reaching the target in the budget year.
And that's the change that has been brought to light since the subcommittee took its action.
Yes, it has.
Right. So then we would restore the March version.
Right. So if the university doesn't have any problems with it, we're just going with the language. So I would move the restoration of the trailer bill language to the March version.
Thank you. Senator Lewis made the motion. Senator Huff?
We support that. You can do unanimous.
All right. Without objection, we'll use the 16-0 vote. Next item is the research and specialty programs at the University of California.
So this issue relates to the allocation of the $500 million budget reduction that's reflected in the March budget. And specifically, the Senate adopted some provisional language to state that the reduction could not be applied towards the Drew Medical School and AIDS research.
However,
Elio?
Thanks, Senator. Both houses, I think, have expressed some interest in the extent to which these $500 million reductions should be allocated and what could be shielded from those cuts and what should not. We believe that's a policy call on the part of the legislature to decide how much specificity you want to provide to the universities on allocating those reductions.
Senator Huff? All right. Senator Huff makes the motion, and we will move forward with a 16-0 vote without objection. Item page 37 is apportionment and deferral at community colleges.
Yes, Ed Hansen, Department of Finance. This issue is similar to the K-12 deferral issue that you heard earlier. The governor's May revision proposed adding $350 million in apportionments to buy down the amount deferred. The Assembly, similar to what it did on the K-12, adopted some one-time money and increased the buy-down deferral. And I believe the deferral buy-down now is a little bit over $400 million.
I think it will be reducing the deferral from around 961 to 561.
a little bit less
The
than
ongoing
that.
deferral.
Yeah, it's not from 961 to approximately 580 million in change, I believe.
Elio?
And similarly, as we had recommended for K-12, we think it's a wise investment of these dollars in order to buy down these deferrals.
And Senator Liu?
I would concur and recommend the language before you to defer the $319 million from the community college apportionment, and I guess that's it. And
All right.
The issue conforms with the Prop 98, what we did with K-12.
So again, as we did with K through 12, we're reducing the deferral for community colleges. And given that we've lost a member, the 11-5 vote will now be a 10-5 vote. The motion will pass. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Wolk.
Okay.
And I should correct myself on page 36. I had said it would pass with a 16-0. That would be a 15-0. And we'll give you a moment to catch up on all that. So item 37 passes 10-5.
And 36 passes 15-0.
Correct. Page 36 passes 15-0.
Got it.
And sticking with the community colleges, student fee shortfall.
Yes, the governor's budget estimated budget year community college student fees at $456 million. The Assembly adopted a estimated fee amount of approximately $25 million less based on some different assumptions that were provided by the LAO.
And this is as a result of fewer students paying the student fees?
Student fees are difficult. It's an estimate every year, and it's a challenge every year. This particular year is even more challenging because we have increase in fees. We have some attrition because the colleges are cutting courses. The fee waiver rate, we don't have good information until the fall, and the fee waiver rate seems to be increasing. So it's always a challenge to estimate student fees, and this year is particularly challenging. We're comfortable with our estimate. The LAO made some different assumptions and came up with a slightly less or slightly lower estimate.
I'll move staff recommendation.
All right. Senator Huff makes the motion to provide the $25 million from Prop 98 funds to cover the anticipated student fee shortfall at the community colleges, and that will pass 15-0. On page 39, we have financial aid mandates put forward by the governor and the community colleges.
Yes, the May revision proposed to amend community college provisional language to allow approximately $55 million in financial aid funding to be used to offset two mandates that would achieve a little over $3 million in savings. The May revision also proposed to suspend approximately 6 mandates that would have saved approximately $6 million. The Senate took different action. The Senate chose to suspend 2 mandates, and the provisional language was denied. So the proposal now, I believe, is just to suspend the 2 mandates.
LAO?
We had actually recommended supporting the governor's original position on this one. This is really a question of if you think community colleges already receive adequate funding through the main categorical item to cover these costs, or whether you think there should be a specific additional money provided. The governor proposed saving that additional money by counting the money you're already providing in the categorical.
Clear enough. Senator Liu?
Well, I think we didn't address the K-12 mandates, and I think that conversation is going forward in other budget language. It's not before us today, so I'm quite frankly not sure where it is. And what you have before you is to reject the governor's proposal, because I think it's still an ongoing conversation with the governor's office and the legislature.
All right, so to reject the governor's proposal relative to these 2 financial aid mandates. Is that an 11-5? That will pass with a 10-5 vote. Thank you, Sia. Thank you, committee members, for your patience. We are on to our last pages. We're moving on to the Employment Development Department. This is the administration's proposal relative to the alternate base period program.
Correct. Jay Sturgis from the Department of Finance. The proposed language would amend the 2010-11 Budget Act to appropriate $48 million of the $840 million in federal ARA funds to cover EDD's administration costs for the ABP program.
Thank you, LAO.
Yeah, Todd Bland for the LAO. The minor changes we've made were agreed to by Finance and the LAO. They ensure that the funds cannot be spent until 12/13 and give the legislature a little more control by having the 12/13 budget process to review the funds.
So I think we're all in agreement that our unemployment insurance fund is in a stressed situation, but I understand that we have this small window of opportunity to be able to access these funds.
That is correct. We can reserve this $48 million for the alternative base period or other purposes in future years, and we can only do that during a window when we are temporarily not borrowing, which is the case during this very narrow time right now.
How long is that window open?
I believe it's open through about the end of June, and that's all.
All right. Not a moment to spare. Senator Liu? Oh, I'm sorry. Senator LaMalfa.
Thank you. Finance, what confidence do we have that ARRA is going to be still following through in 12/13 or up to 14/15?
These funds are actually, the $48 million is going to be spread over 3 fiscal years, so we're setting aside the money to be used starting in 12/13 and then for the next.
You'll already have it in hand?
Correct.
Okay. Well, I think it's imminent. I don't know. EDD's not here. We had to certify to the federal government we were going to adopt the alternative base program. I think we did make that certification. I'm not sure if that's been approved. It may have been.
I think you're actually. I believe he's correct. Yeah, it hasn't been approved yet, but we're pretty confident that.
We're agreed. We're confident it will be coming.
And without these amendments, we would be at risk of about a $16 million additional cost to administer the program in 12/13?
We wouldn't have the $48 million for that or other purposes we might need at that time. That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
In exposure.
Senator Rubio.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move on staff's recommendation.
And that would be to approve the
modified amendments to the 2010-11 Budget Act.
Very good.
Saw my exercise.
And that passes on a 10-5 vote. Department of Finance, pension reform study.
Sure.
I'm sorry, did I skip an item? No. 41.
Yes. Buster?
Okay. Budget shortfall, sorry.
So the Department of Finance has identified a $2.7 million shortfall in our upcoming budget year. We're doing everything we can to reduce the shortfall that would be greater without this augmentation, but we are asking for additional dollars. And Todd Drew, the department's chief operating officer, can walk you through additional details.
Sure. As Mr. Cohen mentioned, we do have a shortfall. What I wanted to focus on was the types of things we're looking at in order to, in the future, be able to give some of this money back. We're looking at assignment consolidations and also our supervisor span of control. We're looking at consolidating some space and moving some additional people into our 915 L Street lease. We're looking at some of the classification levels and some of the promotional practices in order to save additional money. And then we also have a problem with the programs that we have that are a reimbursement general fund split. We have the wrong split. We want to keep looking at that in the future to make sure that that doesn't cause a drain on general fund resources. With the goal here being that we continue to retain staff, maintain the high quality work that I think we do, but to do it as fiscally efficient as possible.
Thank you. LAO?
Nothing to add.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion on staff's recommendation to approve the budget augmentation.
All right. So the motion is to approve the augmentation. Senator Huff.
We have some concerns here absent a budget package. We understand you have some turnover issues and lack of staffing and other stuff, but we would be more interested in knowing how this plays out next year. So we're actually trying to figure out, how do we play this? We lay off and wait and see how you do it, or go ahead and support it with reservations? And so I just want you to understand our conundrum. You know, absent a full budget package, we're just a little concerned about augmentations.
We certainly understand that, and we would appreciate you, at this point, if you're not comfortable voting for it, just holding off the roll. We're committing today to provide you whatever information you desire over the coming year to make sure that you're comfortable that the department's running itself the most efficient way possible. I can just take this moment to say that the Department of Finance staff are the hardest working people I have ever been associated with. No disrespect to my my former colleagues at the other end of the table.
Mr. Chairman, can I pull back my motion, please?
We could split this with the LAO. So well, the motion is to approve the Department of Finance's budget augmentation. We'll call the roll on this.
Leno?
Aye.
Huff? Alquist?
Aye.
Anderson? DeSaulnay? Emerson? Evans? Fuller? Hancock? LaMalfa? Liu? Lowenthal? Rubio?
Aye.
Simidian? Wolk? Wright? DeSaulnier, aye. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 1.
9-1.
Passes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Errata page 41.1, also Department of Finance, and this is the pension reform study.
That's right. So this was $1.5 million. We originally proposed to have CalPERS do some work in sort of anticipation that there would be a pension reform package as part of the budget deal, the Senate moved those dollars to the Department of Finance to control their use. I understand there's an interest in going and sort of taking that out of the Budget Act, and certainly that's fine. We would assume that when a pension reform package goes forward, those dollars could be appropriated at that point.
I'd like to move staff recommendation.
Thank you, Senator Huff. Thank you, Senator Huff. We have the motion, and that will go out in a 15-0. 41.2. So, colleagues, this is a proposal that had been brought forward a couple years ago. The program provides senior citizens who own homes with tax relief by allowing them to defer their payment on their local property tax. We, the state, would pay the local governments that lost revenue, but then get it returned to us when the home is ultimately sold. So the idea here is that in these stress times, there are seniors at risk of falling into foreclosure, and this would be a loan from us to those senior citizens to keep them in their homes and then recoup that loan later when the home is ultimately sold. This would conform to an Assembly action.
I'd move staff's recommendation.
We will have a motion by Senator Huff, and we will move that with a 15-0 vote. Page 42. Page 42 is local assistance for the cost of homicide trials in the county of Del Norte.
Move staff recommendation.
Thank you, Senator Huff. If there are no questions, that will also pass 15-0.
Well, I do have one question.
Okay. Senator Rubio.
What homicide trials were they, and why is this county unique?
There is state law that allows for the reimbursement of these costs, and this is the result of, I'm told, 5 different homicide trials in Del Norte, and that they have found themselves in some tight times, as most states have, but due to its very small size, extraordinarily so. Elio, can you help at all? And Elio, and then to Senator Evans.
Yeah, under existing statute, after review by the controller, counties can seek supplemental funding through a section letter process. It's not clear to us at this point why these funds didn't go through that process.
Thank you, Senator Evans.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I don't know the specific details of the homicide cases, but there are 2 that are ongoing. And the information I have is that Del Norte has $21 million in its general fund, but the trials are expected to cost $2.4 million. So it's about 10% of their general fund. It's a very small county. It's a very poor county. It's a very rural county. I believe it's the home of Pelican Bay. Mr. Amalfa could, confirm that. And so it does, unfortunately, undergo this kind of cost on a regular basis.
And I believe of the 5, 1 was a change in venue, which caused the county some undue hardship.
Well, then, with all due respect, perhaps then someone could introduce a bill to help this particular county and other counties who may find themselves in a similar situation to help expedite this letter process through the controller's office rather than having a budget item. It just seems to me that would be more appropriate public policy than putting it in the budget in this fashion, because I'm sure there are other counties that would like to do this.
Didn't Assemblymember Chesbro have a bill on this?
Assemblyman Chesbro has been quarterbacking this effort already.
So we're taking his bill and putting it in the budget?
I believe it's a time issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just asking a question.
No, reasonable questions. So again, without objection, 15-0. Thank you, colleagues. Page 43, cash management and budgetary loans, the early repayment of special fund.
This is basically the flip side of the conversation in terms of switching the paying off the loans to the settle up, so you could view it as conforming.
Conforms to page 30, the inter-year payment deferral buy-down. And the vote on page 30 was 11-5. My guess is this may be 10-5.
I'd like a roll call vote.
Call the roll on page 43. The motion then would be to conform to the education action on page 30.
Leno?
Aye.
Huff?
No.
Alquist? Aye. Anderson?
No.
DeSaulnay? Emerson?
No.
Evans? Fuller? Fuller, no. Hancock? Lamalfa? Lou? Lowenthal? Rubio? Semidion? Wolk, absent, and Wright. It is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 5.
10-5. Motion passes. Page 44, reductions in state operations. So this has to do with the governor's proposal for the elimination of some boards and commissions.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Richard Gillihan, Department of Finance. So this is an extension of a proposal that was originally in the governor's budget to achieve $200 million in general fund and $163 million other fund savings through various efficiency measures, departmental consolidations, eliminations, reorganizations, things of that nature. In the March budget package, that 200 was increased to 250 by the legislature, with the other funds staying the same. And then in the May revision, we proposed a revised control section that provided additional specificity to departmental eliminations, reorgs, consolidations. As those went through the various subcommittee processes, we had some differing actions, and the proposal before you today, which is not our proposal, but it would reconcile those actions between the houses.
Thank you. LAO?
Nothing to add.
All right, very good. So I think we all applaud the governor in his ongoing efforts to reduce cost and size of government and to operate as efficiently as possible. The Assembly took action to eliminate 22 boards and commissions. The handful that they did not reject or did not eliminate, so rejected the elimination, the idea behind it being that hold on them for now gives us a little more time to evaluate, given that each of these, of course, do have a constituency and a reason for being, and they include the Salton Sea Restoration Council, Dungeness Crab Review Panel, all advisory committees on salmon and steelhead, Commission on Emergency Medical Services, Healthcare Workforce Policy Commission, Rehabilitation's Appeals Board, and the Occupational Safety and Health Standards Board. In addition, the proposal was to reduce the preservation technical assistance within the Department of Housing and Community Development. Would be revised and now rejected. The one correction from our agenda, the changes will result in overall savings achieved of $19.1 million general fund, 5.6 as opposed to 5.4 million of other funds.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. There was quite a bit of discussion on this particular item in the subcommittee because in this particular control section was all the discussion of reducing or eliminating or consolidating the boards and commissions. So there was quite a bit of discussion. One of the topics that was brought up that I'd like to bring back to the table if I could, and that is what gives perhaps the most heartache or reservations to most folks are the salaries that some of these boards and commissions receive. The merit often is not put in question, but more so the salaries. And so I'd like to move on staff's recommendation with an amendment, adding language to simply eliminate the salaries that go beyond the small stipend and pay for travel for these boards and commissions, not making reference to your constitutional ones like the Public Utility Commission or those, but the other commissions that receive the six figures. I think that perhaps might be getting to the heart of an important issue that has brought up much discussion in the public, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rubio.
Mr. Chairman, before I finish my motion, and allow me to consult with staff and entertain any other questions or motions from members.
So we are
Mr.
reviewing.
Chairman, I would
Senator
just note
Hancock.
that we did get a list of the final commissions at some point, but I don't have it with me now. I don't know if anybody else does.
Senator Hancock, is this what you're looking for?
You have it?
Mr. Chairman, let me get back to my motion if I could.
Sure.
What we did in subcommittee is moved on staff's recommendation, but I have the technical wording for it, which is a supplemental report language directed the Department of Finance to come back to provide the direction to look at, rather than eliminating or consolidating, perhaps those commissions that still provide a great deal of merit and value to the state, to eliminate the salaries and remove them just to the stipend. That's my motion.
Very good.
Could I ask for a clarification, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, of course, Senator Simitian.
Is the motion to look at it, or is the motion to do it?
Both.
Well,
it's to provide the direction, and this was the question. The question before the committee was, for those boards and commissions that provide great value at little cost to the state, other than the cost associated with salaries for board members or commissioners, should we look at A, eliminating that board or commission, or B, should we look at keeping it intact but just eliminating the salary, reducing it down to a simple stipend rather than over $100,000?
But the motion today is to continue to look at that issue, not to actually effectuate a reduction from salary to stipend without further action.
It's simply to provide direction
To the Department of Finance.
to the Department of Finance.
To look at, but not to take the action unilaterally? If we're going to have a debate about whether a particular board or commission requires
it's the former, not the latter.
Okay, a full-fledged salary in order to attract qualified people, I'm happy to have that debate, but I want to know what the proposal is and what we're debating and what the consequences are. If we're simply talking about directing the Department of Finance to tee up that conversation, I'm ready to support the motion today.
Yes.
Okay.
Because the position of Department of Finance coming into the discussion, just for purposes of background, was to simply unilaterally implement or to consolidate. And so it was to direct the department to take that into consideration. So it would be to direct, not implement.
I will just say, in passing, Mr. Chair, we didn't spend a lot of time on calorie cycle earlier today, but if ever there was a demonstration of unintended consequences, so we eliminated the Integrated Waste Management Board, a board about which there was frankly never much concern in terms of its performance. There was quite a bit of concern about using it as a sinecure for retired legislators. I take that point absolutely. But we are paying the price for that today, and the public has not been well served in my judgment. I think the evidence reflects that pretty clearly. So I think the move toward consolidation and cost reduction is one I want to pursue, but I just think we need to be thoughtful about it as we go forward and not discover that we think we've saved a few bucks only to discover that we've turned, multi-million-dollar enterprises on their head.
Thank you, Senator Samiti, and I appreciate your clarifying Senator Rubio's motion, because I, too, think that we need to really have a very close look and examination, especially at some of these six-figure salaries. But I'm not prepared to do anything wholesale today. Would much prefer to, through this supplemental report language, have a look at exactly what the tasks are, what the amount of time put into accomplishing those tasks would be, and what an appropriate remuneration would be. So that's part of and that is the intent of the supplemental report language.
Can you restate the motion before we vote?
Senator Rubio.
Thank you. It is to move on staff's recommendation, which is to adopt the above conforming actions and modification to also include supplemental report language for the Department of Finance to take into consideration, rather than eliminating or consolidating boards and commissions, to eliminate or greatly reduce the salaries for those commissioners or board members that sit on them.
Senator Evans.
Yeah, I've been listening to the debate. We had a lengthy debate and discussion on this very item in subcommittee. Mr. Lamalfa was there as well. And I believe I was on the losing end of the vote. If I remember correctly, I made many of the same points as Senator Samitian. The problem is that we don't have enough information, I think, in front of us right now, but many of these boards and commissions actually do employ professionals. And after we had the lengthy debate in the subcommittee, some of the members of the State Mining and Geology Board, who are professional geologists, came up to me afterwards and said, thank you very much for the debate, because we are professionals, we are on the board, we actually do regulatory work, and they get paid for it. Some do and some don't. Actually, I believe those particular gentlemen might have been volunteers, but some of these boards and commissions actually do provide a professional service, and before we do anything about it, including, I think, giving direction to the Department of Finance to say examine those salaries, I think we better know what we're talking about, and I don't think that we do. It's kind of operating in a vacuum, and giving a specific direction of the legislature, I think, gives it the wrong impression that that's what we want to do.
Your comments are well taken, and I think the result of this conversation is such that we've given staff enough information to be able to draft that supplemental report language to effectuate the desire of the senator who's made the motion. So I feel comfortable with it. Senator Samitian.
I'm sorry to belabor this, but I actually think, Senator Evans, through the chair, I think as the motion was clarified by Senator Rubio, the point I heard was, actually, before you all go tossing these commissions out of existence, why don't you think about whether they can be retained if they are doing worthy work, but at a more affordable level by virtue of looking at stipends or reduced salaries. That, it seems to me, is a desire to hang on to the boards and commissions and to make sure that we retain their good work and not make elimination the default, if you will, but rather to think about whether or not, if they're worthy, they can be retained at some lesser cost. So I don't see it as a aggressive move to push these folks out of existence or to unilaterally reduce salaries to stipends. I hear it the other way around, which is the senator's motion on the floor as it now stands is to say, can we hang on to these, and before you start tossing them out, let's look at whether or not there are less expensive options. So with that understanding, I can vote for the motion today and will.
You've restated the motion clearly. All right, and that will pass on a 10-5 vote. Okay. Yes, all right, folks, this is another one of the Assembly proposals, and what it would do is authorize each House of the Legislature to transfer funds from its budget to other state departments and programs relative to Control Section 2850. And if you...
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion on staff's recommendation, which is to approve the amendments to CS 28.50.
Very good. And that will pass on a 15-0 vote.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Mofa.
May I ask a question of finance at this moment, since we're about to take on a revenue question here?
Of course, go right ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to get a status update on the Indian Gaming Special Distribution Fund, and what is its current status? Is there an opportunity or an effort to actually distribute that fund as part of the money that would be available to help with the local government and some of their issues, relieve a little general fund pressure in that with that portion of funds?
Hello, Mr. Chair. Jennifer Osborne, Department of Finance. I don't have the details about the Indian Gaming Special Distribution Fund with me, but as you know, there's no proposal in the budget to address those funds. We've had continued concerns with the future viability of the fund, given that the priorities in the statute for the fund are first to basically backfill revenue sharing trust funds, and then second and third to basically provide for some both the state regulatory programs, and also there's problem gaming programs, and that the local mitigation grants, which I'm guessing you're referring to, are the fourth priority. And so there was an appropriation last year in a trailer bill, and this year at this time there's no proposal to appropriate additional funds.
When do you think we should take that up?
There is an annual report required in state law on the Special Distribution Fund that the Department of Finance prepared earlier in May. We're happy to get you a copy of that, and certainly...
Please. It should be. It would be a very good topic to bring up the next 7 days here and enter into these negotiations.
Mr. Chair, if I...
Senator Wright.
We have to be careful because the United States Constitution prohibits the backfilling of general fund money with the Special Distribution Fund. You can't take a dime, and the Rincon decision recently reaffirmed that you can't do that. You can pay a local fund, but you can't backfill the general fund with the money that you offset. So that local fund that you pay has to be specifically related to something that the local government provided to the tribe. And we still can use in some of the general fund some of the compact money that was the fee that we received for the slot machines, but you can't offset general fund money because the IGRA specifically prohibits taxing the tribe, and the distribution fund is not a general fund substitute.
Certainly, what I was referring to was the actual requirement that to the extent the special distribution fund is no longer available to backfill the revenue sharing trust fund, which goes to the tribes, then the general fund would at some point have to step in.
It can go from the general fund to the trust fund, but it can't go it can't go the other way. So, I mean, I just wanted to make sure that we were clear that it's not a two-way street when you're using the special distribution fund.
Senators, it's a fascinating conversation. We have one more item before us. It's 7 o'clock.
It's my hope, Mr. Chairman, that we could have that enter into the discussion here before the budget expires here in a week. So thank you.
No, thank you, Senator Lamalfa. Senator Rubio.
Mr. Chairman, just on the topic, those funds, the local governments he was referring to, many of them are rural in the Central Valley, so I'd be very interested in it as well. I'd concur with Senator Wright's comments.
All right. Page 48. Mr. Cohn, it's all yours.
Thank you, sir. The topic of bridge financing, as it's now gotten the name, has obviously been a hot topic the last few days. Basically, when people use the term bridge financing, they're talking about, as you all know, the governor has been seeking a special election to have the voters sort of have this opportunity to decide the future of state government in California. Obviously, that can't take place in June, as was the original plan, so the governor said he'd like that election as soon as possible. The bridge financing is asking the legislature to extend the taxes, the sales tax, the vehicle license fee that are in effect now, the dependent credit from last year, until that time that the voters can weigh in and decide whether or not they want to extend the taxes for the remainder of the 5-year period or not, and want the legislature and the governor to go a different direction. I just wanted to take the opportunity to emphasize why the administration is seeking this bridge financing. In preparing the May revision, we did look at every conceivable option, and ultimately this is the one that provides the most stability and makes the most sense from a governance standpoint. Since January, the underlying rationale for the bridge financing has been to protect education and public safety. Since those components of the budget occupy more than half of the state budget, if there's no guarantee of revenues up through the election, then there's going to be a gap which you need to fill with spending reductions. Those spending reductions would almost certainly hit K-12 schools, community colleges, the universities, and public safety. And so at a time where we're trying to create stability for the state's core programs, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to make those reductions on June 15th for the fiscal year and then immediately have to turn them off if the voters want to extend the taxes, as we think they will. Similarly, from a a retailer perspective, we'd be asking those sales tax vendors to change their registers for July 1st to go to the lower level, then a few months later go back up to the higher level. And so ultimately, we think that creating a stable programmatic and financing scheme until we can get to the election and let the voters decide at that point makes the most sense. The final point I would make is on a cash basis, basically the state's ability to pay its bills. Without some length of extension to an election, we have deep concerns about the state's ability to go out to the private market and get our external cash flow borrowing, the revenue anticipation notes, the RANs that we're counting on. And without that ability to go to the market, then you end up back in the situation that we faced, unfortunately, the last few years with payment deferrals or IOUs or those types of things. And that doesn't make sense, again, with the notion of the voters getting to decide, are we going to extend these taxes Or do they want us to go to the all cuts budget notion? And so ultimately, what the governor's asking the legislature to do is get a little bit of time so that the question can be put before the voters, and they'll decide what they'll decide.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. LAO?
Jason Cisney from the LAO. The tax issue obviously has been discussed a lot. One thing that I do want to repeat from what Mr. Cohen mentioned is the importance of the state's cash flow in your final deliberations. The issue of how exactly you approach these taxes or the alternatives that you adopt in replace of some or all of them are very important for the state's ability to finance the budget plan that you're about to pass. And so in recent years, we've recommended, and we would continue to reiterate, that when you're at this phase of the discussion, the legislature needs to have, and the leadership needs to have, a candid conversation with the treasurer and the controller about your ability to actually finance the budget plan that you're adopting, and exactly how you approach these taxes will play a critical role in what the controller and treasurer will be able to tell you about that.
Thank you, Senator Wright. We have a motion to approve the trailer bill language to extend the governor's tax package for 1 year until an election could be held. Senator Huff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the LAO, in the May revision, we scored $6.6 billion that were not anticipated in the January budget. And when you run that through your software over there, what does that project out over the 5 years as far as increased revenues? Obviously, the governor's looking for taxes for 5 years, and how does that look like on your revenue assumptions?
This is a very difficult issue, as we've discussed with your staff. There have been a lot of changes between January and May, and so what we've done is look at the Department of Finance's numbers that they presented in their multi-year forecast for both periods, January and May. We tried our best to adjust to make the comparisons apples to apples, and by our count, for the 6-year period, 2009-10 through 2014-15. Revenues in, as of the May revision that the administration estimates, are about $13 billion higher over the 6-year period, 09 through 15, as compared to what they were in the administration's January forecast.
Okay, so that's the backdrop, members. And in the governor's May revision, he reduced his tax package by $3 billion, but he increased spending by $11.4 billion over that actually 6-year period that the LAO is referring. And that's why we have some reason to doubt that these taxes are about protecting current services. The January budget actually was growing government by 31% over the 5 years. The May revision was growing by 25% because we had increased revenues. But even here, when you get new revenues, we're programming it out with only $3 billion, that's scored to actually saving money and paying down debt. So the question before us is this bridge tax. And we would argue that it's not really a bridge tax. That's an interesting term of art, but it's a tax. How do you have an election in September, let's pick a month, September, but still continues on 9 months afterwards? That's called a budget year. And if you're saying no, if the voters say no in September to raising taxes, but it continues on for 9 months, that flies in the face of actually giving the voters a decision, doesn't it? You say, we want you just to verify this. They say no, and then they're in effect for another year, and then you've got another budget year to decide, and yet the voters are denied the right, as even the governor had said in January, that he wanted to put taxes before the voters. And we were led to believe that all that was before us was allowing the people to decide, but somewhere from January to the May revision to now, the goalposts have been moved, and it's no longer just letting the people decide. It's, oh, we just can't save enough money, and oh, by the way, we've rolled back $2.5 billion, thank you, since March. $2.5 billion. We as a legislature in actions today was 1.1 billion. We have an appetite to grow government. We don't have an appetite to cut back government, but we want to go to the voters And by the way, you change the goalposts with us, but then you go to the voters and say, we want you to verify these taxes, we want you to codify these, but if you say no, it's still going to cost you for another 9 months. By the way, these are the same taxes the voters said no to just 2 years ago. So how many times do we have to ask them the question? How many times do we ignore the answer? How many times do we ignore the opportunity to scale back government to a sustainable level? I mean, that's part of the problem. Just before the May revision, we convened a road trip down to Pomona in my district, Cal Poly Pomona. We went up to Silicon Valley, and what ensued was this, we would call an all cuts campaign of fear. You remember that? We asked the people to come up and just tell us what an all cuts budget would be like. And they came up there, and we heard all kinds of terrible things. We did have some say that they wanted to see the Republican reforms. But in fact, as we see here today, the Democrats and the governor do not have an all-cuts budget in place. They have fooled the people once again by saying that, by scaring them. And by the way, we're supposed to be reading some tales of woe, I think, even on the Senate floor tomorrow or the day after. But instead of things being worse, we got $6.6 billion more, and we're asked for yet more while we ramp up the spending again on things we had already made the cuts. We'd made the tough decision in May or March, and so now we're ramping it up again. Treasurer Lockyer and credit agencies have said there must at least be trigger reductions that take effect if the taxes fail. But from what I've seen here today, the Democrats have no plan for that. So what do you do when the voters say no? Because I've seen no poll out there. I've heard nobody in my district, at least in any large amount, saying they want to support taxes. And yet that's all we keep doing around here because we can't bear to make any more cuts, even with increasing revenues, with less cuts have to make. There are Republican votes to put this on the ballot for the people to decide. There are no Republican votes to put up a so-called bridge tax. We would call that a bridge too far, as well as a bridge to nowhere.
Thank you, Senator Huff. I know it's late. I don't think anyone's interested in long speeches. But
I'm sorry. Oh, you're going to say something.
I'm going to say a few things, and Senator Hancock, you certainly will have your moment as well. I just want to reiterate, we have cut $19 billion in state spending in recent years. We have cut, we have starved, we have cut back on higher education, we have cut back on K through 12. We cut back on nurses, on counselors, on librarians. We have cut this state back to the bottom of the barrel. With regard to the LAO's projections, and I appreciate the question, and this is no aspersion on the projection capability of the LAO, but there are uncertainties in our economy which make these projections, as Mac Taylor continues to remind us, just guesses. They will certainly be wrong, either high or low. In 2008, the LAO projected for the 11 and 12 budget year that we would have 125 billion general fund dollars. We're at 85. So these projections are not dependable, and we know that. Add to that a $34.7 billion wall of debt that we've accumulated over past years as we've cut and slashed and cut and slashed. We need some revenue, folks, to pay down the wall of debt, to begin to rebuild the public structures that made California the 8th largest economy in the world. We would have preferred a June ballot. We all know we would have preferred a June ballot. That is not an option for us at this time. So I'm not here to debate Senator Huff. We have differences of opinion on this issue, and I respect his position. I hope he respects mine. But the fact is, and I think the point that Mr. Cohn made, was that without an extension, there will be a significant hole in our budget, and there will be need for further dismantling of education, K through 12, higher education, putting it further and further out of the reach of working people and middle-class people in California, the key that has provided opportunity for generations of California being taken from folks as a result of their inability to pay ever higher fees and tuitions. And with regard to going back to voters, I do believe that the Republican proposal to balance this year's budget was to go back to the voters, not a second or a third time, but a fourth time, to redirect Prop 10 and Prop 63 funds. So I think that is an opportunity for all of us. So again, we'll have this debate on the floor in the coming days, but we have to be in recognition of the fact that without some sort of bridge extension, and we're not asking in this proposal to have voters weigh in on the subsequent 9 months of June to the end of the fiscal year. That would be done legislatively in this proposal. We would be asking voters in September, conceivably, to approve a 4-year extension at the end of that 12-month period. Senator Hancock.
Thank you, Senator Leno. Just in terms of, I hope very much we could pass this measure, which would maintain our existing taxes for another few months until voters can say if they want to maintain the taxes that we've had in place for the last year for another period of time, say 4 years. But just speaking as the chair of the Public Safety Committee, chair of the Budget Committee that deals with prisons and corrections, I am very concerned that in the absence of maintaining our taxes and doing the realignment program that the governor has laid out, the United States Supreme Court has told us we have to release over 30,000 prisoners in the next 2 years, and that we have to release 10,000 of them by October of this year. And to me, it is extremely important that if we're going to move forward in an organized way to do these very, very important reforms, we're going to have to maintain the taxes that are set to expire on July 1st. So I do hope that we can set aside our long-range philosophical differences and help the state of California get through this difficult time.
Senator Emerson.
Thank you, Senator Leno. I just want to say that we gave an opportunity for the taxes to be extended on the ballot, but my colleagues on the other side and some of your stakeholders didn't allow that to happen. And to date, we have not seen the approval of some basic reforms that we asked that I believe the governor was supportive of. This bridge financing that you like to call is a violation of the governor's pledge. He wanted the voters to make that decision. And so I'm here to say that there was a group of us that were willing to put it on the ballot. It was rejected on your side, and so now here we are asking to put new taxes on the ballot for the voters to make that decision in September or October or whatever it is. But take in mind that the difference between now and when that ballot measure goes on, that there are new taxes, and you're asking California voters to make that decision. So we're going to have more discussion about this, I'm sure. I just got a message here that we're going to be dealing with this issue every day at 10 o'clock. So I'm sure we'll have a lot of debate on this, but let's not forget that we did give you a pathway to get there to put the taxes on the ballot.
Senator Alquist.
Thank you. I've been sitting in the same chair for about 9 hours now. So I'm not going to make a big speech. I really just want to speak to one targeted issue, and that is just because we got more money in with the May revise is no guarantee that the economy is really improving. I tried to read up by looking at information from 8 or 10 different economists each month, and I don't hear anybody saying that, boy, it's just going to go like that. In fact, since the May revise came out, there's been some turbulence. And so to suggest that it's even going to stay on an even keel for another 3 years, we cannot even say that. Whatever we do, and this is just my main comment, is that we have to be prepared to have great deficits for the next 3 to 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Wright has made a motion that's before us. We shall call the roll.
Leno,
Aye.
Huff,
No.
Alquist. Aye. Anderson. No. DeSaulnay. Aye. Emerson.
No.
Evans. Aye. Fuller. No. Hancock. Aye. LaMalfa. No. Lou. Aye. Lowenthal. Aye. Rubio. Semidion. Aye. Wolk. Absent. And Wright. Aye. 6, 8, 9 to 5.
The motion passes 9-5. Colleagues, thank you for your attention, for your patience as we made our way through our agenda today, and we will continue the debate on the floor in the days ahead. We stand adjourned.